Welcome to the other side of medicine. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Christosic, aka Dr. J. Glad that you're with us this evening, spending some time with us. We've got another great program in store for you. If you are a first-time listener, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you're a long-time listener, well, it's good to have you too. You know, I've been on the radio and since 1989, and then moved into podcast a little less than a year ago. And it's been an interesting ride going from radio to the internet, podcasting. Certainly a different animal, I would say, but it's been challenging to say the least, but fun at the same time. I love challenges. And tonight we're going to be diving into talking about the gut 911 fix. It's been 4 parts we've gone through. Today we're on part 5. We're going to be looking at tonight a continuation of how the gut affects several things. Obesity, weight gain. In America, we have 70% or more than 70% of people who are overweight. 30% are obese. We're going to be talking about stress and its connection with not only obesity, but heart disease, cancer, and a lot of other things. We're going to also look at how stress affects every single system of our body and how we're going to be able to overcome that by taking charge of our health, a proactive role in your health. If you are an advocate of natural medicine, you've come to the right place because we believe in natural medicine first, drugs and surgery last. So let's dive in and have a continuation of last week. I'm going to open up the slides right now so we can dig right into what we're talking about here. We opened up this slide last week and we started to go over some of the overview of this particular slide and how the gut affects our weight, affects obesity. So let's kind of go through each one of these and take a look at and kind of dissect it. And so when we look at the normal gut flora and we look at the person who's non-obese, the person who's got normal weight, maybe he's a few extra pounds overweight, but the person who's got extra weight carrying around that's obese or maybe carrying on more than they really should, they'll have a different type of profile in their gut. And so let's take a look at the person who's healthy. And we first of all see that there's an increase in a particular class of microorganism called Bacteroides. So when we go over to the person who's on the obese side, we see a difference of the predominant type of bacteria that are living inside of their gut. It's called Firmicutes. That's a particular class of microorganisms. So the ratio in a healthy person is greater the Bacteroides and less of the Firmicutes. Of course, it's flipped. It's vice versa when we have somebody who's obese. That's what the research clearly indicates. Then we also want to look at how this obesity epidemic in modern times has coincided with all these variables that we're talking about, and our diet, how we move, the water that we drink, the stress that we have in our life. Actually, the science shows, you'll learn about, this is interesting tonight, who we live with or who we live in close proximity to, even our neighbors, can affect our gut microbiome, the bacteria living inside of our gut. Isn't that interesting? So the closer relationships that we share, the more the microbiota, the gut bacteria that we share. Of course, there's a lot of other variables too that affect the type of microorganism living in your gut, including medications. We know that medications are devastating to the gut flora. And so even taking antibiotics for 3 days, simple 3 days of antibiotics decrease the level of these things we call short chain fatty acids, which are very beneficial. We talked about these in the past. These short chain fatty acids are made from primarily carbohydrates. People are staying away from carbohydrates. Not a good idea, especially when you need these short chain fatty acids to do so many things we've talked about. We'll kind of review some of that more as we go deeper into this. But these microbiome, the gut bacteria, break down the fiber inside of the fruits, vegetables, and whole grains if we're eating the whole grains and lots of fruits and vegetables, and they produce these short chain fatty acids. And we know that in studies that just 3 days on antibiotics decreased the butyrate levels, which is one of the short chain fatty acids, significantly. Now, don't be fearful, because what's really nice about the microbiota is that they bounce back quickly. Now, you don't want to have them oscillating back and forth from good to bad and good to bad. You want to establish a real good foundation of healthy bacteria so that you can take advantage of the benefits that they provide. So we're going to be talking more about that. Again, the microbiome, the bacteria living in our gut, affects our weight in a dramatic way. So let's look at some more of these things. Now, we also know that now this is actually a little bit of a misrepresentation on this. The protobacteria are really not so good guys, and that should actually have an arrow going down. There's less protobacteria, because protobacteria, they should be on the other side of the equation. They should be on the obese side. I'm not sure how that got flipped. I had changed that, and somehow it got wiped out, but that's okay. So we're looking at right now the protobacteria, which are harmful. Again, they are on the obese side. When it's out of balance and there's more of the harmful, the protobacteria cause inflammation. They've been linked to cancer, colon cancer, especially breast cancer. They've been linked to inflammatory conditions of the bowel, like diverticulitis and irritable bowel syndrome, and histamine intolerance, which a lot of people are fearful today, because histamine is a part of our body's immune regulation, but it's when it overreacts, then we have a lot of symptoms. You get stuffy nose and itchy eyes, but it goes way beyond that. And we'll talk about that in future programs. But also type 2 diabetes, which is at epidemic levels in our country, and of course, obesity, are all linked to this proteobacteria. So we see that in the healthy person, that there is a great deal of diversity. The bacteria living in the gut, there's a lot of variety. Variety is the spice of life. And in our gut, you want to have a lot of different types of microorganisms. And in healthy people, they have a much greater diversity than the person who is obese, person who has got carrying extra weight around. So you want to have a great deal of diversity. And the way you get that is by having a diversity in your diet, a lot of different plant foods. That's why I really emphasize over and over again, eating a primarily plant-based diet is so important, because all the research across the board shows eating less animal protein and more plant-based foods, you're going to have much greater diversity, and you're going to have less of the harmful microorganisms living inside of your gut. So we also know that in the obese person, there's a lot of gram-negative bacteria, and so that's not good. You want to have the opposite, and the diversity of the microorganisms are really not there. There's less diversity. That's very important to understand. Okay, so let's see. Okay, there it is. I see it. It's the okay. Yep. Okay, I'm trying to. Oh, let's see. Oh yes, here we go. The inflammatory response, again, is triggered. Again, this is because there's confusion on my computer, and again, this happens not only to me, to just about everybody I know. Inside of the short chain fatty acids of a healthy microbiome, a healthy person, there's a lot of short chain fatty acids. So the increased levels of short chain fatty acids are predominant. And we see that with an arrow going up. And we know that also there is the tight junctions that's where the surface of the lining of the gut has these cells that line the gut, and they're closely compacted, and that's tight junctions. But in the person that's obese, these junctions are a greater gap in them. There's a greater gap, and that lets molecules of toxins and artificial colors and flavorings and chemicals to get into the bloodstream, causing confusion and causing inflammatory response inside the body. So, got to be careful. We really need to make sure that we are protecting the healthy microbiome inside the gut, and we are making sure that we are doing everything we can to allow our bodies to heal and restore and repair. Very, very important. Okay, let me go ahead and move down here. I lost position there, but we're going to slide back down here. Let me move. Okay, so we see that there's greater insulin sensitivity. That's a good thing. We want to be able to respond to insulin. And when we are eating healthy whole foods, we're getting enough rest, we're getting enough exercise, we're eating a lot of high fiber foods, we're going to get a much greater sensitivity to insulin. So when insulin goes to the cells, it can actually get inside the cells. We've talked in the past how if the cells are impervious to hearing the message from the insulin trying to get in, then it'll send out more insulin, and then insulin will cause inflammation inside the body. So you want to be careful. You want to increase the insulin sensitivity, and when you have obesity, there is resistance to insulin. So the body will have insulin come to the doors of the cells, knock on it, and it won't hear it. So it's got to send out more insulin, and it just gets flooded with insulin, and it gets too much, and that causes inflammation in the body. So insulin sensitivity is decreased with people who are overweight. So you want to be careful how that transpires inside your body. You want to make sure that what you're doing is helping the body to cooperate with it. So that's really, really important. Okay, so the other thing is we know that the immune system is responsive, and the adaptive immune system is increased levels of capability of helping our body to stay alert and be able to change with whatever circumstances we're in. And the body has a memory, and so that adaptation from our immune system is very responsive when we have the right healthy microbiome and we have healthy weight. So it's really a very good thing to keep our immune system on target and be able to respond as quickly as possible. But we know that with the overweight people, the immune system becomes less resilient, is what I want to say, and more prone to overreacting to our environment, autoimmune diseases, a lot of things like that. So inflammation is decreased in people who have normal gut microorganisms. So in the person who's healthy and normal weight, they don't have a lot of inflammation, whereas we know with people who are overweight, the inflammatory response in the body is working overtime, and it's going inside the bloodstream, and it's being transported to all the parts of the body. And wherever weaknesses are at, you're going to find there's going to be trouble there in those areas that are weaker. So we really want to make sure that we're really taking care of our gut microbiome, so that we can make sure that we are able to take advantage of all the powerful mechanisms that are built within inside of our body to help to keep us healthy. So our risk for cardiovascular disease, which we're going to talk about tonight, is decreased when we have normal, healthy weight, not only because we're carrying less weight and we're not putting extra stress on the heart, but because of the interplay with the good and bad bacteria. As you'll find out tonight, when the microorganisms living inside the gut are disturbed and we have more of the harmful microorganisms living in there. We talked about the difference between the normal weight person and the obese person having different types of classes of bacteria. So when the not healthy class of bacteria are living inside the gut, there's more inflammation. And when you have inflammation, you're more prone to a lot of chronic serious diseases. So we got to be careful. So we know that we have increased development of fat when we have the wrong type of microorganisms living in there, because we talked about this in the past, how the harvesting of calories is increased. So when you have the wrong type of bacteria living inside your gut, the ability of the body to utilize calories out of the foods gets enhanced. And so you get more calories. The more calories you get, the equation turns out that you're going to have more fat deposits. So we have increased levels of adipose tissue, which is fat. And that happens when we have the wrong type of microorganisms living inside of our gut. So, and when you see this on the right-hand side where it says decrease energy harvest, that's referring to the energy related to our ability to perform cellular activities, but as well as just normal muscular activity, so movement, ability to think. If we are having a right balance of good bacteria and a very minimal amount of commensal or bacteria that could be troublemakers at times, if we have more of the good, we talked about that 80-20% ratio, then our bodies are going to produce a lot more energy, up to 15% more energy production. So if you're tired during the day, it may be because your bacteria is out of balance and you have more of the harmful bacteria living inside your gut, and your body's not producing that extra 15% of energy. So it's really behooves all of us to pay significant attention to the type of microorganisms living in our gut. This is not something the average doctor does today, but here on the other side of medicine, we emphasize the need to really explore all the data and all the avenues that we can do to help to enhance beneficial bacteria and to try to discourage harmful bacteria from living inside of our gut. So that's what we're talking about. This whole series on the Gut 911 is to rescue the gut, and the microorganisms living inside of our gut play a vital role. So we really have to take care of, make sure it's good housekeeping that we have, that we're really helping to encourage more of the beneficial bacteria inside of our gut. So we're going to see that we have increased levels of the LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, the triglycerides, which is bad fat that can be also a risk factor for heart disease. Both of those factors are. And we know that triglycerides, where they come from? Well, they come from refined sugars, refined carbohydrates. We're talking about white flour, white rice. As I tell people all the time, the whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead. So you got to stay away from those refined carbohydrates, because you're going to end up having the harmful bacteria in your gut process those things and turn them into inflammatory compounds. And then we end up having an increased risk for heart disease. So the tight junctions that's TJ on this chart on the obese side, that is something that's really important. We talked a little bit earlier about how the tight junctions on a healthy person, on a normal weight person, the cells on the layer of the gut, on the surface of the gut, there's only one cell layer thick. Those cells are tightly next to each other. They're sitting next to each other, and they have what we call tight junctions. Let me go to this slide here and see if I can produce this here for you so you can see this slide. It's a couple slides back. Let's see if we can get there. Well, maybe I had, oh, I know, I kept it close to me so that I could show you and refer back and forth to that, and that's right there. Okay, so if you look at the cell, this is the surface of the intestines, primarily the small intestines. And if you look here, the white area up here represents the lumen, or the opening inside the gut. And this is one side of the wall of the intestines, and it's the cellular layers, only one cell layer thick. And if you notice here, these cell layers look like cans of canisters. They're really tight here. That's the way normally they should be. And they open and close when you are getting foods that are being absorbed, but then they close back up again so that you don't have toxins get in there. And so when they allow a gap to be in there, like they are right here, those tight junctions will allow toxic elements get into the bloodstream, because from this point forward, these cells, the next thing is down here is this bloodstream. We don't want toxic elements getting into the bloodstream. So those junctions, they get more separated in people who are overweight, and they get loose like this, as you see here. They get openings, and we want to keep them tight like this unless we're having absorption of nutrients. And the body knows when to do that and when to close them back up. But if we have them perpetually open like this, then we're going to have toxic elements, primarily things like the LPSs, which we'll go back here to the slide. If you notice over here, yeah, so the LPSs right here, increase LPS and cause inflammation. LPSs are called lipopolysaccharides. Those are toxic elements. They cause a lot of trouble inside the body. We have to make sure that's why we don't want to have a lot of harmful bacteria, because they spit out these toxic elements. They poop just like we do too. These bacteria have waste matter, and that waste matter is these lipopolysaccharides, these LPSs. And if they get into the bloodstream, they cause havoc. So we want to make sure that we keep those junctions tight and keep them healthy, keep the integrity of that lining of the gut intact, so that we don't have any harmful substances, any harmful compounds getting inside of the bloodstream. So very important. Once again, the overview is with our normal healthy weight, we have diversity that's increased. We have diversity that's decreased in the overweight person. We have a lot of these cells are opened up, and they have on the surface of the intestines, we have these junctions that are leaving gaps, getting the toxic elements get inside the bloodstream. We also have insulin sensitivity is decreased when we have a healthy body weight. We have insulin sensitivity. When we have insulin resistance, we have too much weight we're carrying around. That means that the insulin is not being utilized in an efficient manner to get inside, helping the sugar molecules to get inside the cells. So we end up having too much of the sugar that's hanging around inside the gut, and then we end up having too much sugar that gets inside the bloodstream, and then we end up having problems. So we got to be careful that we take care of the gut integrity and make sure that we respect the gut, heal the gut if it's been damaged, which most people have damaged guts. And so we got to make sure that we really take charge and do whatever we can to heal that gut. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide here. We got a lot to talk about tonight. I really want to dive into some of those other things here with you. There's so much material to go over here with you. I want to talk about, let's see here. Let's see. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so let's dive into this right here. I want to talk about this. This is a really important slide because the researchers have shown that the type of gut microorganisms that live inside the gut when you're eating a high animal protein diet, which is typical in America. The standard American diet has a lot of animal protein and a lot of refined carbohydrates, which is equivalent to getting a lot of sugar inside of our bloodstream. And as you'll note tonight, that the two are equally as bad. Refined carbohydrates and sugar, and consumed in the quantities that the Americans eat, is deleterious. It's very, very dangerous, harmful to the gut. But specifically, we're looking right now on this slide, and you see there is up on the top left quadrant, you'll see phosphatidylcholine and choline. These are found in elevated lots of animal proteins, specifically red meats and other animal proteins have a lot of choline in them, and that choline is taken into the digestive system, and whatever types of bacteria are living there, if it's the wrong kind of bacteria, we're going to have that bacteria, whichever type it is, work on that choline inside the gut, and on another amino acid called carnitine, which is again elevated in animal protein. We know that when the harmful bacteria are present, primarily the proteobacteria, which you talked earlier that is bad, that bacteria starts to work on the choline and the carnitine, the amino acid carnitine, and it's transformed into a substance that's not very, very beneficial. So this trimethylamine is found in foods that are high in choline, and that trimethylamine is then broken down by the bacteria in the gut that are harmful, and then it goes through inside the liver, and it's transformed into a very toxic compound called trimethylamine oxide, and that's TMAO. Now, when it gets into the circulation, it can cause damage to a lot of body parts, including the blood vessels, which can cause atherosclerosis, which is clogging of the arteries. And we know that the number one cause of death here in the United States is heart attacks and strokes. So one of the biggest factors we know that causes it is when the arteries get clogged up with plaque. And as you can see, this TMAO points down here to atherosclerosis. So the TMAO, which is transformed by the gut bacteria, and then it goes into the liver and it's made into this toxic compound, which damages the blood vessels. This is not a good scenario. And we have, again, so many people, 1 out of 2 people are dying from heart disease. That's pretty dramatic. And 1 out of 3 people are dying from cancer, which is still bad enough. But now we're finding that it's not only choline and carnitine, which are high in animal protein, but we're also finding that sugar. Scientists have found that sugar does pretty much the same thing that this carnitine and choline does in the presence of these harmful microorganisms. One of them, the harmful microorganism they've identified, is called gamma proteobacteria. Once again, that proteobacteria pops up, but it's gamma proteobacteria, and that damages the blood vessels even in the absence of high animal protein. So we know that sugar as well as high animal protein diets will clog up the arteries and cause heart attacks and strokes. Isn't that interesting? So sugar is another culprit, which Americans are just addicted to this stuff. We know that the average American's eating 150 pounds of sugar per year. We've talked about that before. That's over 23 tablespoons of sugar per day on average. Now, I'm skewing the average because I don't hardly eat any sugar at all. If I get maybe 2 grams of sugar a day, that's a lot for me. The average American is getting a lot of sugar every single day. So we got to recognize that sugar is another harmful, toxic substance that we're taking in and just ruining our bodies. And by the way, in the British Journal of Medicine, they found that not only there was like a 60% chance of heart attacks and strokes, but there was an 87% increase of overall any kind of disease, chronic diseases, by this intake of sugar. And this is in about 20 different studies. So this is pretty dramatic. We have to get serious about not ingesting high animal protein diets, which again, in about over 20 studies, they found this TMAO is precipitated by eating high animal protein. So both high animal protein and high sugar intake is leading to the same deleterious effect of this high levels of this TMAO that you can see here, which is a toxic compound, clogging up the arteries and causing havoc inside the body. This is really a dangerous scenario that we're finding people are locked into, because the standard American diet, once again, is high in sugar, high in animal protein, and very low in fruits and vegetables, and very low in good carbohydrates, the whole grains, the grains that have the fiber in it. That, again, that fiber is so important in those whole grains and the fruits and vegetables. And that's why diversity is so important, because remember I talked about the short chain fatty acids. The bacteria, the healthy bacteria, chomps on the fiber, both from the fruits and the vegetables, the beans, the nuts, the seeds, the grains, all those plant-based foods, and it makes these compounds, short chain fatty acids. And these compounds have far-reaching effect. They help to, we talked about this before, the lining of the gut. They keep those tight junctions so we don't have this leaky gut. They help to produce mucus so that we have the mucus layer covering that small intestine, so we don't have that barrier broken down, causing ulcers, and then these LPSs, those lipopolysaccharides, leaking into the bloodstream. So the healthy bacteria chopping on that good fiber from fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, and nuts and seeds that are whole grains, not refined carbohydrates, they make these very beneficial short-chain fatty acids that regulate blood sugar, keep the blood sugar normal. They regulate the cholesterol levels and the triglyceride levels. They help to keep our brain functioning at optimal levels. There's so many things that these short-chain fatty acids do. And we're going to continue to talk about those, because it really behooves us to look at the benefits of all these variables that are triggered by beneficial bacteria chomping on the beneficial carbohydrates. Wow, that's a lot. And, again, the person that is not being told this by their doctor goes to their grave, unbeknownst to them, that they have a great deal of ability to prevent these things. Remember, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, and the average person is not taking advantage of that. So we need to get people to listen to the other side of medicine. If you have family or friends, tell them about this program, because we want people to get this knowledge. Knowledge is the key to health. And people are not receiving this information. All they're getting from their doctor is prescription medications, surgical procedures, and very little information about how to prevent these diseases and how to reverse disease by reestablishing a healthy gut, a healthy microbiome, the type of bacteria you have living inside your gut. All these variables play a huge role. They also stimulate a healthy immune system. Because remember, over 70% of the cells in our gut-related tissues, are part of the immune system. So that immune system resides in the gut. So that's our protective mechanism against all disease. And our gut, we have to make sure that we respect it, and we make sure that it's not being abused, and we're not going to have the harmful bacteria overtake the residence inside of the gut. All these things are important for us to do, and we want to make sure that we're doing our part by eating healthy foods, staying away from the foods that are triggering inflammation, which we know the two biggest ones tonight we talked about: refined carbohydrates, sugar, almost the same thing. The United States Department of Agriculture has found that refined carbohydrates like white rice, white flour, all the refined grains, they act like sugar. We're talking about cane sugar and the sweeteners, even the artificial sweeteners we've talked about in the past, the sucralose and the aspartame and all these various refined sugars and artificial sugars disturb the gut microbiome, and cause inflammation. So don't think that you're doing yourself a favor by eating these refined sugars or these sugars that are artificial sweeteners. They're just chemicals that disturb the balance of the gut bacteria and trigger inflammation. We got to be careful. Okay, so let's move on to our next slide here. Again, we can't overemphasize the necessity of protecting this gut lining. This gut lining right here is the key to not only healthy digestion, but it's also the key to preventing chronic diseases. We know that if this gut becomes leaky, and like you see this big gap here, that's called a leaky gut. We know when that happens, we are setting ourselves up for disaster. We're going to have inflammation that's going to circulate through the whole body, and we're going to have toxic elements that are going to go throughout the entire body and wear down the cells, cause the cells to be toxic. And when we have toxic cells, we set ourselves up for disease, including cancer and other inflammatory diseases. So be careful. Do your part, and the body will make sure that you stay healthy. Now, we know that stress, from emotional stress, physical stress, when I talk about physical stress, if we're exposed to the cold without being properly covered in our bodies and getting exposed to the cold, we end up stressing our bodies, emotional stress especially, which Americans are exposed to at their workplace, in their homes. There's so much stress that we are all exposed to. And what it does is that it really stimulates this HPA axis. That's the hypothalamus axis, which is up in our brain, and it stimulates that, and it produces things like adrenaline and cortisol and other types of hormones. And those hormones, when they're constantly being released, because, once in a while, if you have stress, if, let's say, you're living in the wild and, you're living healthy and happy life and eating healthy foods, mostly plant-based, and you're drinking healthy water and you're exercising. But occasionally you see a lion or a tiger or a bear, not going to be a problem because your body has a mechanism in it to be able to increase your blood pressure rate, take away all the energy from your digestion, because it doesn't need to digest. It needs to have all the strength of your muscles to move out of that dangerous situation. And so there's a lot of mechanisms that happen. So hormones are released, like adrenaline. I mean, you've probably heard of somebody whose child was being threatened, or maybe maybe you know somebody that had a car tire was landing on somebody's foot, and that person, maybe a woman, was able to even lift up the car because that adrenaline rushing inside of their body when they were so frightened by that situation was able to have such strength. Well, that situation is good when you use it in a threatening situation, like if you're confronted by some danger point, like an animal in the wild, or somebody that's in a danger and you help them out. That's a good thing. But the problem becomes when we are constantly all day long being triggered, having that the hypothalamus axis being triggered and adrenaline is being shot out because our boss is yelling at us, or the children are screaming, and we're arguing with our siblings or our husband or our wife, and that's going on all day long with a lot of people, and that's releasing these hormones. And when that happens, if you look on this chart here, we know that that's going to release these IL-17, which are inflammatory compounds. That's not a good thing to have these being released on a regular basis. And when that happens, we end up having the lining of the gut gets damaged, and we have those tight junctions open up. So it starts to wear down the lining of the gut. And we get these various compounds that go inside of our system, and we end up having a release of compounds that damage the blood vessels. I don't want to go into too deep into this chart. There's a lot being shown here, but what happens is eventually these compounds, they damage the blood vessels, which then you start to getting clogged arteries, inflammation in the arteries, and you start having heart attacks and stroke because those arteries get clogged up, and now you're more prone to heart attacks and strokes. So stress induces the healthy bacteria to retreat, harmful bacteria to start to grow, inflammatory compounds start to be released, and we end up with triggering atherosclerosis, or once again, clogged up arteries, and then we have heart disease again through the mechanism of stress. So once again, these are all things that happen on a regular basis in America because Americans don't have the tools, because their doctor's not teaching them how to manage stress. And one of the things we do here on the other side of medicine is we give you those tools so you don't have to have a constant barrage of these compounds that are circulating in your blood and triggering inflammation throughout the entire body. We don't want that. So I equip you. On the other side of medicine, we have lots of resources. I have a 3-part series on YouTube that you can go to. Just put in Dr. Christosic or the other side of medicine and put in anxiety and deep breathing, or stress and deep breathing on YouTube. And you'll see a 3-part series there. There's a 3-part series on how deep breathing has a profound effect to neutralize the adverse effects of the stress that's triggering so much disease. So if you practice this breathing technique that I share with you for free, you will be able to be confronted with stress, but be able to instant to neutralize it, to dispel it, so it doesn't have an adverse effect on you. We're all exposed to stress every single day. Wow, that's some pretty heavy duty thunder. You hear that? We're getting a lot of rain here in Northeast Ohio right now, and we need it. But that thunder sure sounds like there's some bowling going on up there in heaven. Hell, St. Peter is knocking some bowling pins down up there. But anyways, yeah, so the deep breathing exercises, I highly encourage you to go on YouTube, search Dr. Christosic, and look for the 3-part series on deep breathing and anxiety, or put the word in deep breathing and stress. Either one of those words should pop it up for you, or try one. If the other one doesn't work, it'll pop up. And there's 3 parts. If you don't see them all in order, don't worry about that. Just scroll up and down and you'll find them. There's 3 different parts there. And I will post them up on my website so you can have easy access to them. Because I know sometimes on YouTube, it gets a little disjointed and things are all over the place. So I'll post them up on my website. I'm going to make a note of that to make sure that I post them on my website. And when I promise to do something, I really need to follow up. So 3-part series on stress on website. The website's theothersideofmedicine.com. That's theothersideofmedicine.com. So once again, these are things that once again, you're not going to get this information from your doctor or your therapist, because they are typically going to be, if you're locked into the medical model, they're going to be prescribing medications. They're going to be given, advice for surgical procedures. We want to prevent all of those things. Again, as I started off the program today, is drugs should be the last. Drugs and surgery last. Natural medicine should be first. Keep that in mind. And if you follow the principles here on the other side of medicine, you'll really be able to take advantage of that. Once again, I don't want to go over this slide too much with you, but I'm telling you, this is probably the most important slide that I could share with you. And I can't overemphasize the need to keep the integrity of your gut lining intact. Look at this right here. This is in the small intestines. Now, if you look here at the lumen, the opening, this is the wall right here. And if you see my arrow here, at the very top, you see this not the blood vessel, the small intestine. It's a tube, right? And you'll see blood vessels on that line the small intestines. And those blood vessels then will get in circulating through the entire body. So the wall of the intestines, this beige area on the lumen, or the opening of the gut, this beige area coincides with these beige cells. They're only 1 cell layer thick. I mean, just look at that. Just 1 cell layer, 1 layer of cells, 1 thin layer of cells. Again, on top of those cells is a mucus layer. That's a very thick mucus layer, which is a protective mechanism so that those cells don't get damaged. And then after the cells, you have a membrane, but then after that, you have the bloodstream. So you have 1 cell layer thick, and then you have the bloodstream that's very close to those 1 cell layer thick. And if those cells get damaged, and you have these tight junctions that get separated, now you could have a lot of elements that should never be entering the bloodstream. They're now being transported through this opening, and they're getting into the blood, circulating. And these are inflammatory compounds, inflammatory lipopolysaccharides, LPSs. I'll just remember LPSs. As I told you, I'm going to take 1 program, and I've done this in the past for some of you who have listened to previous programs, but I'm going to go over it again so you can really see how these lipopolysaccharides are so deleterious to the body. They cause so much havoc, so much harm. And those things are precipitated. They're released by the harmful bacteria. Remember, we started off the program today talking about the higher levels of the firmicutes, which are found in people who are overweight. But inside of people who are even thin and have harmful bacteria that's living inside of them, like the proteobacteria, the people who are thin and have those types of proteobacteria and other things like we've talked about, the H. pylori and other types of microorganisms, Clostridia. I mean, there's a lot of harmful microorganisms that then can trigger a lot of different chronic diseases. So you want to protect the gut lining. Once again, the population today, 70% of the people are overweight, 30% of people are obese. So we know that there's a lot more people who are overweight, but even thin people, don't think because you're thin that you don't have a lot of bad bacteria. If you're thin and you're eating a lot of refined carbohydrates and you're eating a lot of animal protein and you're eating a lot of sugar, I can guarantee that your harmful bacteria are elevated and you have leaky gut. If you have symptoms, whether you have diabetes or you have depression or you have inflammatory bowel disease or you have arthritis or you have an autoimmune disease or cancer, if you're thin, don't think that you are not going to be susceptible to having a leaky gut and having harmful bacteria. You could have it just as much as a person who is overweight. So it behooves you to learn everything you can to ensure the beneficial bacteria. Once again, 80% of good, 20% of bad. That's just a hypothetical number that I pull out of my hat. I'm just looking at it from a perspective we should have a lot more good than harmful. These microorganisms that can be harmful, there are ones that are actually harmful, but there are ones like H. pylori that could be living in a healthy person because they have balance of the good and the bad, and they're called commensal. There's just the right balance. They're commensal. And if the situation gets ideal for them to raise their ugly heads and multiply, they can cause havoc. So you've got to be careful. Your lifestyle is paramount. Your lifestyle is what is going to determine the balance of good and bad bacteria. And the good news is that most Americans can turn this plight around by taking charge of their health, getting connected with a doctor, a functional medicine doctor, who can then guide them through the process, help them to reestablish the healthy bacteria inside their gut, help them to eliminate the toxic, harmful bacteria, to restore the lining of the gut, and to feed the body with the nutrients it needs to repair and restore. Good things will come. Good things will result. Disease will retreat. The body will heal itself. It's already designed to do that, my friends. The body's designed to heal itself. I tell all my patients that I don't heal one disease. I've seen people, and if you go to my website, you can see all of these chronic diseases that have been helped by my guidance in helping the body to heal itself. I'm seeing people with, like we talked about, heart disease. I've seen people with congestive heart failure, people with high blood pressure, people who were elevated cholesterol levels that were out the roof, and they were like 350 cholesterol levels, 400 cholesterol levels, and they brought her to normal, and they were able to reverse the damage that could be done. I've seen people with diabetes, with blood sugar levels of over 500, my friends, over 500 levels. The normal blood sugar levels should be around 100, 80 to 100. I've seen people and patients of mine who had elevated levels of blood sugar up to 500, and yet we brought them back down to normal without medications. The body is self-healing, self-repairing. I've seen people with autoimmune diseases. I've seen people with Hashimoto's disease, which is a thyroid condition, healed through following these principles. People with lupus, people with inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, people who are supposed to have their entire colons resected, healed through following these principles I'm talking about and sharing with you tonight. I've seen people with other autoimmune disease like acute pancreatitis that was healed by following these people. I've seen people who were supposed to have liver transplants cancel the liver transplants. These are patients of mine who took charge of their health under my tutelage, under my guidance, and the healing power inside the body. These people were able to restore their bodies and be able to live a life of becoming independently healthy. There is hope. There is hope. Well, it looks like we've just about run out of time. So tell your family and friends about the other side of medicine. We're here every single Thursday evening live, bringing you so much vital information you're not going to hear from your doctor. Like me on Facebook, on YouTube. That's going to bring more people to this program. It's going to be able to help me to grow this channel so that I can bring on board more guests, more information, and be able to help more people to learn about the healing power that God has placed inside the body. So tell your family and friends about it. Go to Facebook, it's on the other side of medicine. Join my group, the Other Side of Medicine on Facebook group. You'll get lots of information there. All the broadcasts that I do over the past almost a year now are there in my group. And you can learn so much, and you can communicate with me, and I can get back to you and give you advice. And if you'd like to be a patient, I would be more than happy. I don't have an office anymore. I do telemedicine. It's no problem though, because we can do Zoom calls, we can do Skype calls, we can do a number of different ways to communicate so that I can see you face to face on a call. We can talk over the phone. I can have you get laboratory tests done by either sending out my phlebotomist or sending you to certain labs so you can get lab work done, and we can monitor all the things that are going inside your body to help you to enjoy good health and become independently healthy. That's my goal for you. So once again, my friends, I've enjoyed this evening. I hope you've learned a lot. We'll be back next week. And by the way, every single week, you can watch this repeat of this podcast by going to YouTube, Facebook, and you'll see a repeat of these programs every single Friday. It's posted on those websites on Friday. So you will hear it live on Thursday evenings. If you miss it, you can go on to my Facebook group, or you can go on Facebook on Fridays, YouTube on Fridays, either at the Other Side of Medicine, at Dr. Christosic, at James Christosic. Any of those places you'll find these podcasts. Now, I know that over the last 4 or 5 weeks, I've been talking a lot because I'm really wanted to focus on this Gut 911 course, this whole you fix your gut, 911 fix your gut. We're going to be having guests. I'm only going to be doing 1 or 2 more shows on the 911 gut fix. After that, we'll be having guests. I have nationally and internationally known guests. So don't miss one of the episodes. We'd love to have you with us and join us. Until next week, I'm Dr. Christosic. May God bless you. Here's to your health.